Good evening. This is Rob Bell, and you're watching Getting the Record Straight. This is our Truth to Power segment. We typically get into politics and other issues, particularly, as they relate to the African American experience. Please like, share, subscribe, and have a good buddy here who's decided to share some time with me, someone who I worked with. Man, this is going back like 13, 14 years ago. Really brilliant young man. I guess I can say that. Comparatively speaking. This is brother Leigh Owens, who's on the screen with us. Leigh is, I worked with him at a company called Solutions for Progress some time ago, but Leigh has an extensive background in media, communications, and politics, and activism, actually. He's a former political editor at Huffington Post. He was the deputy digital director for Governor Tom Wolf. He also was very instrumental in helping to get Larry Krasner elected here as district attorney here in Philadelphia, and also worked in the DA's office for some time, and is currently the legislative director for the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, for the Pennsylvania State Council. And so welcome, Leigh. Thanks for coming out, man.
Thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. It's been a good minute, man.
Yes, sir.
A while.
A lot has transpired.
Yes, it has. And you've been integral in a lot of that transformation, if you will, that's going on. I noticed on your Facebook page you have down there, Rebel with a Cause. So that's a good introduction. But let's talk about becoming this rebel with a cause. As I was introducing you, you've been about a lot of stuff, involved in quite a bit, but talk about your early political and activist formulation, if you will.
Yeah.
Coming of age.
Yeah, what's funny is a lot of my political activism, as I understand it today, in 2021, began around the time we met as Solutions. And that was all post-incarceration. I had did a little skid bit on Rikers Island. It was a bullet, which is a year, 8 months. And Solutions was probably about 3 or 4 years after that. Maybe about four or 5 years after that. And that was really my first professional stand-up gig at post Rikers. And all the stuff that was going on in Solutions, man, Bob had was right out to space. So he would have and then, he was always brushing shoulders doing fundraisers for candidates. And so that's how I started hearing about the judicial races, that I had kind of basically getting petition signatures, back then. And that was really the extent of what I saw as possible at the time for me being involved in politics. But I knew that I had known way before that I had a thing for politics. But I didn't see it as a real opportunity. I'm talking about childhood, walking past Shaka's office on 47th or 46th and Farragut back in the 80s and 90s, and wondering what was going on in there, but knowing it was something important and something that not everybody had access to or understood, or, because they didn't, in school, they didn't, I would say for me, I didn't really understand how government worked. So I didn't know what a congressman was or did or speak at that time as a teenager. You know, so but back to solutions during the petition signatures, I got a little taste of the hustle side and like the field game and, you know, what it took to get on the ballot, which hearing that was like, oh, that's all you got to do is get a bunch of petition signatures. I was like, okay, you know, so that is what got me sort of in the door being around solutions. And that was actually how I heard about the Rikers gig. I mean, not the Rikers gig, the Obama gig in 2008. So that was actually why I left Solutions. I don't know if you remember, I left Solutions to be a field organizer for Obama campaign in 2008.
Let me stop you for 1 second and back up a little bit because notwithstanding that Freudian slip, the
Rikers gig.
Right.
I did work at Rikers after my incarceration, believe it or not. Which is
but now Rikers, that's New York, right?
That's New York. Yeah.
Okay, so you know where but you were raised. You came up here in Philly, right?
Yeah, born and raised. Never even lived in New York.
Yeah.
Except after Rikers.
Okay, so how did you get? I mean, were you in New York when the incarceration took place, or?
Yeah. So I
and one more thing. Go into that, but then didn't you do a book too?
I did.
Yeah, you talk a little bit about that. Go ahead.
So we did. I did a skid bit on Rikers, but post incarceration, I actually went back and was like a creative writing instructor and then a case manager after Rikers. So I said that the Solutions for Progress was my first real gig, but really the Rikers Island gig and being part of that was really like the first. And a lot of times I forget about that because it's been so long. And like, honestly, like the way I understand politics now as it relates to direct service, the things we see being taken away by our legislators and our current administration. And, you know, I didn't view that providing direct service to returning citizens, you know, trying to retain them for 90 days and make sure that they could try and build a path forward as someone who was still trying to build a path forward himself, right? I didn't connect that to politics and to even really activism at the time, but it really is all connected. So again, back to these opportunities with the judicial races and then hearing about the Obama thing in 2008.
Well, talk a little bit about the book though. You did a
you want to talk about
writing
the book?
Right in there, right?
So right up in there, we back in I think that was 2007, 2008, and that was a whole mess. Just the whole publishing side of that. My goodness.
Well, you know, that's kind of how we connected, because I had just finished self-publishing a book myself right before I came to Solutions.
And see, my book was more of a coffee table book. It was more of a you know, more photography and trying to capture the moment. So it was about the Gen of Six. You know, at that time you had the six brethren from Jenna, Louisiana, who were being railroaded by the local judicial system there. And this was like 2007, before it was really, I would say, fashionable to talk about criminal justice reform. It was before Michelle Alexander's book, you know, The New Jim Crow. And it was at a time, it was nothing like it is now, where you can talk about compassionate release and talk about ending life without parole and reprieves and, you know, even having a President Obama that visited a prison, right? Like, this stuff is unheard of 20 years ago. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, the book was really about, because I went to the march, and I mean, the way that we invaded this small little town in Louisiana that you would have never heard of otherwise. It was amazing. And it was really a testament to to grassroots organizing and really the beginning of the social media era, because I found out about the Gen 6 March on MySpace. Date myself to tell you how long it's been. I found out about it on the Facebook message bulletin board thing. And I wouldn't have, and I think I wrote about that at some point afterwards. I wouldn't have found out about the march. I mean, and see, Michael Basin and all of them was doing stuff, and Al Sharpton, they was doing stuff on the radio at that time. So so there is that. But in terms of the way in which we were able to connect with all these different grassroots organizations and the amount of people that showed up there, like a testament to meeting the people where they are, right? Because everybody was on MySpace at the time, man. Like the young people weren't listening to Michael Basin on 105.3. You know, they weren't, you know, but again, MySpace at the time was the hot thing. And so again, that was something I had never seen. I had been to protests, but I had never seen a whole town being overwhelmed like that. I mean, it was all peaceful, and it was almost like, it almost felt like the Greek picnic or something. But you know, it was a lot of people in that little town, and you know, at the time I was really into photography, so I got some really good pictures at the time of what happened out there, and put it together in a little coffee table style book, and yeah, I at the time, like maybe not long, I promoted it for a couple months, but after that, I kind of didn't deal with it too much after that, because that's when the Obama thing happened. And after that, man, I got kind of swept up in politics. Like you know, just being on the legislative side with in the 190th, and also again having done Obama and having done a few political campaigns since then, culminating with the Krasner thing.
Well, that's a good segue. So let's talk about Larry Krasner and how you got involved and what transpired with that.
That was a crazy story too, man, because like all my stuff are just crazy stories, right? So at that time, I was planning to move to DC to do this communications gig for, I think it's the Lawyers, it's a civil rights organization in DC. Why can't I think of the name? It'll come back to me.
You're getting old, man.
I'm getting old, man. It's ridiculous.
Join the club. I got notes all down here, man, because I was like, I know I'll forget.
And I trust, I rely on my brain too much, and it always lets me down every single time. But back to Krasner. So I was planning to move to DC to take this comms job, and at the last minute, I mean, bro, when I tell you I had accepted a job, I was planning to move down there, and I kind of got sidestepped with, because I'm a single dad, man. You know, it's just me and my son, and it's been like that for the last 8 years. So a lot of things I have to consider him in, and at the time, it wasn't like uprooting him and all that. It just wasn't a good time, and I was kind of moving a little bit too fast with it. So I decided not to do it. About maybe 2 or 3 weeks after that, maybe a month, I heard about this dude, Larry Krasner, running for DA, and I had no intentions of getting involved in a citywide DA's race. I did the mayoral race in 2015. Was that 2015? That was 2015. Had did the mayoral race in 2015. Had done some races for the state house. Had done a couple council races. Had worked with several super PACs. In the 2016, between 2016 and 2018, when I started with Krasner, I just had no desire or intention to work for a city, for any campaign. But I heard Larry's speech, and I saw his bio, and I was like, immediately I said, all right, I got to work for this. Because it was like, I had never heard of anything like this before. I was like, we got to make this dude the DA. I had no idea the level of activist support that he had at the time. But when I read his story, I, like everybody else, was immediately taken aback and was like, whoa, if this dude can raise some money, he can be the DA. White dude, you know, nice looking dude, you know, knows how to dress and can talk, you know, can really like is compelling and articulate, you know, how they say that about us. But this dude, like, you'd be surprised at the amount of politicians, black and white, that are just not all that articulate, bro. But Krasner is extremely compelling, you know, when he orates, and the brother had a story, like, you know, you sue the Philadelphia PD 75 times and 30 years of being a defense attorney for mostly, well, for, you know, everybody, but, you know, he had several activist organizations that I respect, that he had represented pro bono for years, you know, for this, you know, mainly for freedom of speech stuff, you know, whatever. But so again, when I heard his story, I wanted to be involved. I had heard that there was some folks that, you know, from Solutions that were getting involved. So I literally reached out to everybody I knew that was going to be working with Larry, and nothing materialized. It just didn't come together. So I had just chalked it up. Funny thing is, right when Real Justice PAC was starting up, with like Becky Bond and a lot of some folks that had done stuff with Next Gen America, Next Gen Climate at the time, and I had also done some work with them in 2016. But some of their folks on the higher levels, on the executive level, had went on to start some other organizations. One of those organizations was going to be dispatching organizers throughout the country in targeted district attorney races. And one of those races was the Krasner race. So a friend of mine from the Next Gen campaign that I met on the Next Gen campaign, this dude is in San Francisco. He's in San Francisco. I mean, I knew at least a dozen people that were already involved in the Krasner campaign, but it took, in Philly, that lived next door, basically. But it took somebody from San Francisco to call me and ask me if I knew somebody that wanted to do some organizing. Mind you, I didn't even know it was for Krasner. But when he asked me, he was under the assumption that I was moving to DC because I had put it out there, not knowing I had changed my mind. So I said, well, bro, I didn't move to DC. I'm free. Long story short, I found out it was Krasner, and I just laughed. I was like, this is crazy. So we ended up coming on, myself and two other organizers from out of town ended up being the field department for Krasner's, for his primary. Now, mind you, you remember there were 6 other candidates, and in that Democratic primary, and you know, they had, most of them had started fundraising and running campaigns the year before, and Krasner didn't really start until February. And so we were behind the gun, but he had put together some folks, and you know, it was what it was at the time. We ended up making some changes after the primary, even though we won. But the primary was like where I was able to stand out in the campaign. And it was why during the general, right, around the time of during the primary, but more so during the general, I became the deputy campaign manager. But I was able to stand out just having been so wrapped up in city politics at that time, and even some of the, you know, Philly delegations in the State House, having been able to, you know, introduce him to some folks, and, you know, sort of just because Larry was not great at, he's a little awkward socially, right? With people he don't know, you know, so being able to bring him into events and into those rooms with, especially with Black folks and, you know, Black politicians, electeds in Philly, where, you know, they're a special bunch, you know, and so being able to, you know, be Leigh Owens and sort of just bring them in those rooms, man, and validate them on some level, but being a buffer, you know, really allowed me to be able to stand out and really thrive and show my skill set and really thrive in a skill set that I didn't think I could thrive in, which is running my mouth.
Let me ask you this. Talk a little bit about the significance of that election of, Krasner being voted in, because I really don't think it's I think it's been understated. You got to remember, Lynn Abraham had been the DA for decades, or reelected several times.
Wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, and you have the FOP and the nature of that beast here, and for Krasner to win, who, by the way, attends the same church I do now. And,
is that right?
Mother Bethel, yeah. And so
I love it.
Yeah. I really don't think you can overstate the significance of that election. So, give me your view.
It's Philly. So, Philly, I always joke because Philly, we're the biggest bunch of haters in the country. Mm-hmm. Like, it's amazing how much we just hate on each other. Mm-hmm. As Philadelphians, no matter what industry you in, even the Philly rappers, you know what I'm saying? Like down to the rappers, right? Mm-hmm. But it can't be understated, and it took a lot of people, it took a lot of coalitions, it took a lot of people, a lot of different people want to take just single credit, but like. It took a coalition of people and organizations to make that happen. And I think that in Philly, particularly because of what Larry inherited and the trajectory that things were already, going in, really, he's kind of catching the blame for a lot of the city's woes at this time. But I think that if you look at the record in terms of how our city was before his election, and look at, again, the trajectory that we were already on, you'll see that, and even during the Lynn Abraham era, right, her style of criminal justice, it didn't keep the streets safer. It didn't help. Mm-hmm. It was completely punitive, and all it did was lock a whole lot of people up and destroyed their lives. That's really all it did. Mm-hmm. So anytime you try and go against that deep rooted anti-black pro-police sentiment, which is really what that is. Because a person like Krasner comes along and all he's really doing, if to oversimplify it, is leveling the playing field. That's all he's doing. Mm-hmm. And I say that because for anybody that might not understand why I'm saying that is because, the reason why Black people make up the majority of Black and Latino people make up the majority of the criminal justice system is not because we commit more crimes. It's that we're over-policed. Our community's over-policed and we're targeted. So when you start being fair and giving the same grace to Black and Latino, Black and brown men that you've been given to white people for decades, centuries, really. Mm-hmm. That's all he's really doing, is providing that same leeway, giving that same benefit of the doubt in our communities that white communities have been getting since time began, right? So he's leveling the playing field. But again, like you said, the beast that is the FOP, that is probably one of the most racist organizations in the state. Mm-hmm. If I had to write a list, they'd be on it, right?
They're at the top.
Yeah, they're at the top. Mm-hmm. Going against that, pro-Trump, you know, that establishment in Philly is not an easy thing to do. And when Krasner first announced, McNesby and all those cats laughed at him and said, there's no way that this dude is going to become a district attorney of Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. This is the city where you have Frank Rizzo stripping black men down naked in front of the newspapers. Mm-hmm. The city that blew up the Move House, right? We're going to let the Krasner, but nevertheless, the impossible happened. And again, it took a lot of people to make that happen, man. It really did.
Yeah, it's an awesome thing, man. And, you know, the city, I think, is better for it. People want to make, you know, assert that, you know, crime is worse and that kind of thing, you know, without acknowledging the fact that, you know, this is, if not the poorest, one of the poorest large cities in the country, man. I mean, poverty is wrecking this city, you know? Yeah, so let's move on for kind of the latter part of this to what you're doing now. You're with the SEIU, State Council. You know, what's happening with labor? What's happening with the SEIU? And, you know, talking about the beast, you're in the belly of the beast in Harrisburg, even though you were telling me before we went on that you know, haven't been up there too often lately.
Yeah, physically, definitely been in my house. But as far as the work goes, definitely in the belly of the beast, and you know, really seeing how people's political dreams die. This is where people's political dreams die in Harrisburg, because it is a cynical place. It is quite a place, my brother. But you know, I'm there and I'm representing a union, a very strong and powerful union, international union, that fortunately really does work in the interest of working people, working class people, poor people, people of color, Black people, to be even more specific. And in this role as the legislative director, I've been able to sort of meet at the intersection of the civil rights struggle, you know, the radical progressive struggle, you know, and all of those encompassing constituency groups, and been able to really, you know, be at the forefront of the coalition building and the work that's being done on a statewide level in the progressive space, being at the forefront of that, and, you know, seeing how important Pennsylvania is to the rest of the country, you know, in elections, you know, not just in voting in elections, but and even governance, you know, and the things that we do here become an example, really do become an example for the rest of the country. But also seeing and realizing more, having been told my whole life, but really seeing for myself that outside of Philly and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is one of the most racist states in the country. Top 5, Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia. So that's 3, then PA is 4. So I don't know who the 5th one is, Florida maybe, but they on the top, PA is on the short list. And I say that because, like, we saw Monday, last Wednesday, what happened, and we saw that there were Pennsylvanians there. There were Pennsylnia's legislators. There were some there. Not gonna name names, but they were, you know, and you know, man, like, look, I'm all for coming together, no matter what your party is, to make things better for people, for Pennsylvanians, for everybody. And that's why I do this work. Because when the country and the state suffers Black people suffer 10 times more on average. That's just the way it's always been. So my contribution to the struggle in this role is being a voice specifically for Black people and people of color when I'm in these rooms and speaking up for the things that, because I'm only one Black man. I represent the people to the best of my ability, but again, it takes a coalition of people, Black legislators, other Black activists and union leaders. We come together at different tables to have these conversations and talk about what the best approaches are to getting things done in Harrisburg and really what the priorities are. A lot of times you only get 1 or 2 shots, so you got to make sure that you ask for the right thing at the right time. But because of COVID, I think a lot of, there's just been a lot of crises between the Trump thing, COVID. Last year we spent a lot of time fighting against bills to reopen industries that were not going to help mitigate the threat, right? And again, seeing that a lot of cases, man, money takes precedence over people. But our outfit is really a voice that is necessary in this time. And again, the seats that we sit at, the tables that we sit at together, like we get a lot done in a lot of different spaces.
Now, is there a fair amount of working together, collaboration between your union and other unions? Because when we talked about the FOP, that's a union, but my sense is there's probably not a whole lot of talking going on between y'all. But I'm just wondering how much, a lot of stuff I watch, man, it talks about, if not the demise, that, how the union, the strength unions used to have 40, 50, 60 years ago, and how that's waned so much over the years. But first of all, is there a renewed vigor, if you will, in terms of unions and organizing? And how much collaboration is going on? Are you talking with other unions and that kind of thing to make some stuff happen?
I think there is, to answer the first question, I think there is a lot of new appetite and new excitement around labor unions, around just the concept of unions. And you'll see from like the amount of support Bernie Sanders got during both his campaigns, and even this cry for what some might consider to be a socialist platform. Unions and labor have been at the forefront of that struggle, and millennials see that. And I think that they have been the generation that has really sort of reinvigorated this understanding of power and working people. And at the end of the day, we all want the same things. Now, in terms of the people that are in power within the union structure, that's a different story. Because like you said, you got FOP, you got the building trades, you got the SEIUs, the AFLs, the PFTs, the AFSMEs, you got all of these different unions with different interests, different partners. But to answer the other question, yeah, we have to collaborate on different things at different times. Again, each union's agenda is going to be different because the membership is all about who the members are and who they represent. And the unions, they're fighting for the best interests of their members. But there are certain tables that we all sit at, for different reasons. And so that might be a table that's dealing with, right now, the big fight is judicial gerrymandering, right? The Pennsylvania legislature the Republicans are trying to change how we elect judges throughout Pennsylvania by making it a decision made by a body of legislators, making it, a district, depends on the district, and, organizing it that way. and taking the power away from the people electing those judges. And so there's been a strong push for that in the State House this week, and a heavy push by the progressive movement against it this week as well. Yeah, I mean, that's just an example of like one of the things that there are a lot of different union people invested in this not happening. And this is, I would say, judicial gerrymandering is one of the rare things that I've seen the kinds of organizations speaking out against it and coming together on it in ways that, you know, we haven't done in a while.
It's interesting too, because I'm not even aware of it, and I'm sure a lot of other people are not. But look, that's coming to the close of things. Anything you'd like to comment on in terms of kind of, you know, the overall picture's been so much craziness, obviously.
Yeah, man.
The last few days and what have you. Just want to pick your brain a little bit right before we close
Absolutely.
on your thoughts and feelings of what's been going on.
Yeah, man. I think that I really think that, you know, I come from a spiritual background, bro, and I'm always under the persuasion that we always have room to deepen and strengthen our personal relationships with God. And that is how I cope. That's a lot of how I cope. But I think overall, you know, we're living in some strange times, man. We really are. And it's an extremely interesting time to be involved in the struggle for the liberation of Black people and all working people, all people, really. It's a crazy time to be involved in this work, but I wouldn't be doing it. If I had a choice, I wouldn't be doing anything else. I won't be doing anything else because it's really important to me. It's extremely fulfilling. And I think that, you know, as someone who has had to overcome a lot, you know, personal and professional, you know, and never wanting to betray my personal and spiritual beliefs, I've always felt like it's my duty to give back and use, you know, whatever talents or gifts or passion that God gave me to give it back to the people. And that's why I do this work. You know, it's not glamorous usually. You know, I'm not one of those people that are always getting the top 40 under 40, even though I'm not under 40 anymore. You know, I'm not one of those kinds of people. And there's a reason why I'm not. And I'm fine with that. So I mean, I do this because I love the people. And I've always wanted to be associated with, you know, the people that have fought for social and racial justice, you know. As a kid, Malcolm, Martin, all of them, Fred Hampton, Huey, especially like growing up as a teenager, Huey Newton was my favorite. Because reading all the books, and even like, especially like Seize the Time by Bobby Seale, the way he, you know, and Eldridge Cleaver, like I wanted to be like them as a teenager. And so, you know, that going into adulthood and then the Rikers Island thing, and always having been artistic, right? Being a writer, being a singer, and being all these things as a child, and trying to figure out how to incorporate all those things into a life that I can make money from. Politics just became the thing for me. And I've been successful in it. But most of all, I've been fulfilled in it. And I feel like the little bit that I have contributed, I've seen some tangible impacts here and there, and I see a path toward more positive impacts for the people.
Well, look, brother, it's so good to see you again and get to talk with you, man. I really, really appreciate it. We're going to have to do this again. It's struggle is far from over. Thanks so much, Leigh Owens. And how can people, do you have a website or
I don't.
Yeah.
People you can email me, Leigh, Leigh Owens, Owens 80 @gmail.com. Leigh Owens 80 @gmail.
Mm-hmm. All right, my brother. Thanks so much.
All right, bro. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.